for Landlords. It is October 17th, 2024, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So just like a few weeks ago, I need to update this slide title here. We're going to go over a brief introduction to the changes in utility billing. We're going to go through that really quickly because we've gone through it before, but I might have new people joining me today, so I don't want to skip it. We're going to go over key points of these regulations. We are going to then talk about the petition process, and I'm going to give you an overview of some of the forms you're going to be seeing coming from our office, some of the forms that you're going to be needing to give to your tenants, as well as the petition form and the workbook. And then we will be answering questions. And I do want to mention that if you have questions, you can ask them at any time. For example, right now, if you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand or use *9 if you're calling in on the phone, and I can answer it now. If it is something that will be coming up later in the workshop, I will pause and skip it until we get to that point in the workshop itself. So are there any questions out there? Again, you can use the Q&A function or raise your hand. Okay, I do not see any questions right now, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. We're going to talk briefly about the changes in utility billing. So just a reminder that under the CSFRA, rent includes utilities. That is in the definition of the CSFRA. And to really drive that home and clarify that, the Rental Housing Committee on December 18th of 2023 adopted regulations clarifying that utilities are part of rent. This has always been in the definition of the CSFRA. However, there was some confusion over it, and we wanted to make sure it was as clear as possible that utilities that are not submetered are subject to the rent increase restrictions under the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act. And that means that only one rent increase can be given every 12 months, and that the increase is subject to our yearly rent increase limitations, otherwise known as the Annual General Adjustment, or AGA, and that there can be no fluctuating rental costs within a 12-month period. For example, utilities often fluctuate in the amount that they are and over the course of the year, and that fluctuation could be considered an unlawful rent increase. So we are now incorporating utilities that are currently charged separately from rent and are not submetered into a fixed amount included in the tenant's total rent. And how do we do that? We're doing that through a utility adjustment petition process, where it's going to take your current physical space rent plus the separate utilities currently being charged through ratio billing utility services like RUBS and the companies like Conservice, and it adds them together into a new total rent. It gets rid of the RUBS utility bills completely. Tenants will no longer receive bills through RUBS, and it makes one total amount. Now, if they are receiving utility bills through PG&E, where they're being charged completely for their usage, that is still allowed. So the tenants are going to have their RUBS bills added into their rent, and they'll still have their PG&E bills. Now, to do this, property owners need to complete and submit a petition to qualify for and apply the one-time utility adjustment. So you're going to be asking yourself, do I have to do this? What properties are affected? And all landlords of fully covered CSFRA units need to complete and submit a one-time utility adjustment petition. This even includes property owners who state that utilities are already included in rent. You have to still file a petition, but we have a very shortened workbook for you to complete that proves that utilities are included in rent, because your tenants have to have the opportunity to respond to the petition. They have to be able to confirm whether or not the utilities are actually included in rent. And you want to do this because If it's found that you, are still charging RUBS after these submission deadlines are over, you can have significant consequences, which we'll talk about later. This law does not apply to partially covered CSFRA units or mobile homes. If you have a property where they have partially covered units and fully covered units, the fully covered units are subject to this. The partially covered units are not, and you would just exclude those partially covered units from your petition. And I see we have a person who's raising their hand out there. When we're done with this section, I will go ahead and answer your question. So please know that I see you and I will answer your question and allow you to speak when I'm done with this section of the presentation. So the key points of the utility regulations are as follows. What types of utilities are included in rent? This includes any utility charges paid by the tenant directly to the landlord or through a third-party billing service like RUBS. This could include charges like water, sewer, garbage in some cases. Electrical and gas utilities are also billed through RUBS. If that's the case, there's a separate workbook. It's called the All Utilities Workbook that the property owner would want to use for this petition. Again, utility charges paid directly by the tenant to the utility service provider like PG&E that are sub-metered are exempt. And if you are a property owner where your utilities are already included in the fixed total amount of rent, that is okay. That is exactly what we are doing in this petition process. So you are ahead of the game, but you still need to file a petition so that your tenants can respond. Other things to keep in mind from these regulations that were adopted in December of 2023, tenancies starting March 1st must include utilities. So for any tenancy that started on March 1st or after, RUBS cannot be included. The rental agreement must state the total rent amount and specify the types of utilities and housing service fees that are included in that total rent. So you would have your total rent amount, and then broken down, the line items would say something like physical space rent, $2,000, utilities, $100 per month, pet fee, $50 per month. You spell that all out and then total it to the total of $2,000. For tenancies that existed prior, so before March 1st of 2024, RUBS can continue for existing tenants until the utility petition is filed and approved by the city and the rent adjustment notice is given to the tenant and the adjustment goes into effect. This process transitions separate utility charges into one fixed amount. And the vacancy rates and the new units, those cannot be used in determining the RUBS charges moving forward after March 1st of 2024. And then just as a side note, most tenant petitions that are related to utilities are paused during the transition process unless the property owner is doing something currently unlawful. For example, if you had a new tenancy that started after March 1st and you charged RUBS on that, the tenant can file an unlawful rent petition against you for those utility charges. So again, this is those same points. Pardon me, sorry, 1 second. These are the same points that I just mentioned. So RUBS is not allowed for new tenancies. The total rent must include utilities. The rental agreement must state the total rent amount and specify the types of utilities and housing service fees included. And just a reminder that utility charges paid directly by the tenant to the utility service provider like PG&E or Comcast are exempt from this. For tenancies that started prior to March 1st, RUBS can continue until the petition is filed and approved and the rent adjustment notice goes into effect. Utility charges for vacant or newly rented units may not be allocated to existing rental units through RUBS or similar systems, and utility charges paid directly by the tenant to the utility service provider are exempt. So again, for a limited time, RUBS can continue until these adjustments go into effect. For tenant petitions, there's a whole bunch of details here. We will send you the PowerPoint deck. You can see these details. And I'm not going to read them all today. Okay, so before we jump into what the actual petition process looks like, I see we have one question, and I'm going to go ahead and allow Ted to talk. Go ahead, Ted. You can unmute yourself now.
Hey, Patricia. Yeah, I have a question regarding the sub meter. So I guess we might have exchanged emails in the past, and then so for the sub meter, I guess the in addition to PG&E, if we have sub meters in our own building, and then we read the sub meters, I understand that is also allowed. Can you maybe clarify that?
Can you say that one more time?
So if we have sub meters inside our own building, so it's not through, for instance, PG&E, but we have our own, for instance, water meters and electricity meters inside our building. And then so that's, so each unit obviously has their own usage sub-metered through that way. So, I guess that is also allowed, but, in the example that you just gave, you specifically mentioned PG&E. So I just want to, maybe get a little bit of clarification on that.
Any utilities that are sub-metered where the tenant is charged for their exact usage are exempt.
Oh, okay. All right. So just to kind of drive the point a little bit more, kind of beat the dead horse a little bit more. So if it's water usage and we have a water meter that's specifically just for this unit, obviously PG&E doesn't sell water to us, so that will be allowed as long as we have a specific usage, the water usage to that specific unit.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Ted. And you can go ahead and lower your hand. Okay, we are going to keep moving along. Thanks for the question, Ted. That was a good one. So we're going to go into the actual petition process now. This is really the meat of this workshop and some of the places where we'll go over more details. So let's jump in. First is our implementation plan. You can see we are moving right along. I need to actually update this. We have completed phase 1 and 2, which is performing research and receiving input and adopting regulations. We are in phase 3 is done too. We have started this process. You can file petitions with us. Phase 4 will continue through the whole entire time that we're doing this, and that's really outreach and education, which thank you for joining me today. Hopefully I'm able to answer your questions. We're going to keep doing as much outreach and education as we possibly can because we want these petitions to be successful for everyone. We are in phase 5 and 6, so we have released those petition forms. You can submit them to us, and if you are a property with more than 20 units, you have to have that submitted to me by February 28th of 2025. If you are a property with 6 to 20 units, you got to get that into our division by May 31st. And if you are a smaller property with 1 to 5 units, got to have it into our division by August 31st of 2025. So know that there's rolling deadlines. If you miss that submittal deadline, you will have problems. So really be on top of this. And then the last phase, which we are also doing right now, is processing those petitions. So we have received a few submittals, and we are starting to actually move through the petition review process. So this is all well underway, and thank you for joining us and participating in this as we go along through this new process, this new temporary process. So again, who does this apply to? Every single landlord of every single fully covered unit. If you are a property with partially covered units, it does not apply to you unless you also have fully covered units on the property. So there are 3 types of petition workbooks that you can choose from. You're going to be able to see this and figure this out in the petition form. I'm going to show you that. And that will tell you what workbook you need. So if you are the most common workbook is our standard workbook, you're going to use that one if you are billing through RUBS for water, sewer, and trash. If you're using RUBS to also bill for electric or gas, you're going to use our all utilities workbook. And if you already have rent that includes utilities or are also sub-meter, then you would use our condensed workbook, which is also just a faster process. So again, here are those submittal deadlines that I mentioned based on the number of units on the property. And this is what the process looks like. So you would submit a property-wide petition form and workbook to us with documentation. We'll review that petition form for completeness, and then we send out a notice of submission review. If it's complete, you're going to serve the petition on your tenants and then file it with the city. If it's not complete, you're going to make those revisions and get it back to us within 15 business days. Once you file it with us formally, we will send a notice of formal filing to you and your tenants. It will be different notices. For the tenant, it will have a specific form called a response form, as well as a cover sheet. That information in the cover sheet just tells them about the process and gives them some insights about what to expect. For you, the landlord, you will receive a notice of filing from us with a form that you will need to complete to give the downward or upward adjustment of rent to your tenants. And you'll have time to complete this form for every unit on your property. And you have to give this particular form to every unit on your property if you do end up giving an upward or downward adjustment. During this time period, tenants have 30 days, 30 calendar days to respond to the petition. They're going to respond using a specific form, and they're going to give it to us, and they should probably give one to you too. If they don't, we'll give one. We'll give you the copy of the form. We will then review the petition and selected calculations based on the regulations. So depending on the size of the property, staff will review a specific number of units on the property at random, and we'll review the tenant responses. If there's information in there that is disputed, so let's say in your petition, you say you don't have a pool, and the tenant responds and says, we absolutely do have a pool, then we have to look into what's going on in the petition. We might request additional documentation or request revisions to the workbook based on the response forms from tenants and what we find when we do our calculation reviews. Once that happens, we determine if the calculations are correctly calculated or if corrections are needed. And then if the entire thing is approved, we send a notice of final determination out to both you, the landlord, and the tenants. And then, as I mentioned before, you're going to have this other form that determines if the adjustment is upward or downward, and you will then apply the adjustment to the unit accordingly, as spelled out in the regulation, which are not a mystery. We will help you with all of this. So here's some detailed information on what happens and how you determine whether it's an upward or downward adjustment. So there's a form, like I said, that we're going to make that averages the utilities paid by each unit between July 1st of 2023 and June 30th of 2024, plus the CPI of 3.2% for that time period, and then compares that average against the amount of the one-time utility adjustment in the notice of final determination. So you're going to need to do two things here. One, input the accrued bills. So as the tenant utilized the utilities during a specific time period, that's how you're going to put it in. So even though sometimes bills are 2 months late, if it's a July bill, you're going to look at the July accrual period. So if it's the bill for that period gets received by you in August, you're still going to put in the amount for July. July through June plus 3.2% compared to the amount in the utility adjustment petition. If the amount in the notice of final determination is less than the average utility paid by the tenant, then it's a downward adjustment. If the amount in the notice of final determination is more than the average, then it's an upward adjustment. And this is the only portion of the petition that the tenants can dispute by filing a notice of dispute with the division. So if that's filed, then staff will review the form provided to the division by the tenant and determine if the adjustment is upward or downward. Okay, so if it's a downward adjustment, you as the landlord must provide a 30-day rent decrease notice to the tenants immediately with the new total rent amount, which is the current rent plus the utilities adjustment. Tenants are no longer responsible for paying utility charges billed separately from rent or through RUBS incurred after the effective date of the rent decrease notice, unless the utility charges accrued prior to the end of the 30-day notice period. And tenants are responsible for paying the total rent amount, including the utility adjustment, once the notice becomes effective. So even though it is a situation where we have the total current rent that currently does not include utilities, plus the utility adjustment, it could still be a decrease or a downward adjustment because the utility amount from the petition is less than what the average was during that 12-month period that we talked about, where you're going to be putting in the 12-month of bills as they accrued into that form. That average could be less than the amount that's determined by the utility, or that average could be more than the amount that's determined by the utility adjustment petition. The utility adjustment petition amount is what will be added to the rent. Now, how you will explain it to your tenant is that the RUBS bills are gone, and they have one total that includes their rent moving forward. Okay, so you're going to have the physical space rent or the current rent of $1,000 plus the utilities going forward. There's no more RUBS. If it's an upward adjustment, you add the utility amount determined in the notice of final determination with the next annually allowed rent increase. You have to follow the requirements of the CSFRA if you give the annually allowed rent increase. If you don't want to give the AGA, that's fine. You can always bank your AGA, but you have to give the utility adjustment at the time that you would have normally been giving the rent increase in that 12-month period. So again, you can give the utility adjustment without giving the AGA, but if you don't give the AGA, you have to wait 12 months just like normal because it's still a rent increase. To add this to the AGA, you're going to figure out the annual general adjustment percentage on the existing rent. So $1,000 plus 2.4%. And then you're going to add the allowed utility adjustment onto that amount to make the new rent. Okay, so then going forward, after this year, let's say it's $1,000 plus 2.4% plus $100. That total amount going forward for next year will be what you can add the AGA onto in the future. So if giving the utility adjustment with the annually allowed rent increase, you must comply with all aspects of the CSFRA and state noticing requirement. If you're giving the utility adjustment separately from the annually allowed rent increase, then the adjustment can be given 12 months after the last rent increase or 12 months after the start of the initial term of tenancy. You have to give it at that time. At all times before the rent adjustment goes into effect, you can continue to use RUBS or any similar system for tenancies starting before March 1st of 2024. Because remember, for all tenancies starting on or after March 1st of 2024, they're already supposed to include utilities. And then moving forward, once the adjustment's implemented, only utilities that are sub-metered or separately metered and charged directly to the tenant can be billed separately from rent. Okay, if this is really important, if you do not submit a petition within the deadlines, or you do not comply with the applicable requirements of the process, for instance, if you submit a petition to me and I have revisions for you, and you do not get those revisions back to me within 15 business days, then you forego the one-time ability to add utility adjustments to rent, and you can no longer charge separately for separate utilities. Plus, the current rent now automatically is assumed to include utility charges. Utilities cannot be billed through RUBS unless or billed separately unless submetered. And tenants can file unlawful petitions with the city to recover any overpayment due to RUBS charges. So keep in mind that all the way back into 2016, all the way back until December 23rd of 2016, rent was supposed to include utilities. RUBS is not that system, okay? So Technically, properties that have been using RUBS are in violation of the CSFRA, which means that you could have utility petitions filed against you for these you could have unlawful rent petitions filed against you for these overcharges in rent related to utility bills through RUBS. Right now, we have this grace period that says that that can't happen, and you as the landlord can file these utility petitions to incorporate your RUBS charges into rent and not be having unlawful rent petitions filed against you for this. If you don't do this process, you will be open to having utility petitions filed or unlawful rent petitions filed against you for these utility charges, and you could be subject to having like significant, potentially significant unlawful rent payments that you need to pay back to your tenant. So it's a burdensome process, but it's there to protect you from that. And so just really keep that in mind going forward. Can't like reiterate that enough. File these petitions, file them on time so that you can avoid that situation. Okay, before I go into actually calculating the utility adjustment and looking at the forms with you, are there any questions out there? Ooh, quiet lunch today. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the petition form and the workbook. And then also we're gonna be looking at a few other forms today that we haven't gone over before. So where can you get these forms? Go to mountainview.gov/rent stabilization or mountainview.gov/ I think RUBS. I'm gonna have to look at that. I know we put in a quick link, so we'll test that out today when we're in our review of stuff. Okay, so if you are looking for the forms, I'm gonna go ahead and share. We can test this out together. Okay. mountainview.gov/ there we go. Oh no, okay. Gosh. I know we didn't make it utilities because utilities is hard to spell. There we go. So it is mountainview.gov/RUBS. So if you go to mountainview.gov/RUBS, you're going to land on this page, and it gives you all of the information that you need to fill out and complete these forms. And you can see right here at the top of this web page, there is a quick link to the bottom of the page where these forms are. You can either read through all of this and learn more about the process, or you can just click right here and it's going to take you right down to those forms. So we have an updated petition form. You're going to want to check back here. Sometimes we update stuff. We are troubleshooting and working with our Excel workbooks as we start having these petitions be filed. Sometimes there's issues. For instance, in our very first version of this, we had been using a new version of Excel that had a really great formula, like a really great formula that made everything really easy. That did not work if you have an older version of Excel, which it turns out that a lot of people have. So they couldn't use the form. We went ahead, we found a different formula that works the same way, and we updated the workbook. So if you have an older version of Excel, the workbook's still going to work for you. So just keep in mind, we send out emails when we make updates on the back end of the forms. So keep an eye out for those. And if you have a workbook that's not working and you put something in, just let us know and we'll fix the workbook for you. So you can find your petition form here, the workbooks, and a really important form for most people that I'm talking to today. If you are not the owner, if you are a property manager or a representative, and you're filling this form out on behalf of the owner, you need to complete a representative authorization form. It's here, it looks like this, it's a fillable form. You're gonna click on it, you're gonna put in, it tells you exactly what this is for. You're gonna put in the property address. It's, again, fillable, it's a fillable PDF. As you can see, you can type whatever you want in here. You're gonna put in affected units, you would just say all. your contact information for the person requesting authorization. So this is the contact information for the owner. And then you have your representative information. So this is the contact information for you, the property manager. And then what type of representative is representation is being designated. So there's two kinds, you figure out which one it is. And then if there's been prior authorization, you just click on this. Hopefully we can unclick. I'll have to figure that out. So then you'll put in your signature, the date, print name for the owner will fill this out, and then the authorized representative will fill out this part. So you print this, fill out this form, fill it out through PDF, and then make sure that you provide it as your packet in your packet. Now we also have the petition form, same thing, it's downloadable, and it goes over the petition itself, how the process works, and then what to do. So file a petition. This is the part that I was talking about. This is what you're going to use to figure out what type of workbook you need. So you're going to read these instructions and you're going to say, oh, okay, at least one of these utilities is paid through RUBS, and all of these utilities are sub-metered or included in rent. If that's the case, you're going to select option A, and that's our standard workbook. Again, this is going to be the most common option. And then you're going to gather the information, and you'll complete the petition and the workbook. And there's documentation that you'll need for the workbook. And then you're going to submit the petition to my office for review. And you can do that by email or hand delivery or mailing it to our office. I prefer email. If you want to come in and get some help, you can bring it to me too. It's totally fine. And then there are, again, those submittal deadlines. You really need to hit these submittal deadlines. Your petition does not have to be perfect. You do have to make a, good effort in actually completing the forms and the workbook to have it be considered a valid submission. If you send me a workbook that just has like a name in it and a couple calculations, we're going to kick that back to you and say you need to actually complete this for it to count. So keep that in mind. But at any time you have any questions, we're here to help. You don't have to submit a workbook that you have major questions on. That's not what this is. You can bring a workbook to me at any point. We can sit down and talk about it. We have office hours. We have virtual office hours. We have help every single week. And I'll direct you to those opportunities for support. And we can provide support as you complete your workbook and prepare it to be submitted. We then will review your submission. I'm going to show you what that form looks like. And you have 15 business days once we send you a notice of review to fix any errors or issues in your petition. And then you're going to go ahead and serve the petition once you receive a notice of submission review that says, hey, you did great, serve this petition. There's details on how to do that and what you need to include. Part of what we're going to do for you to avoid you as the property owner having to redact every single petition workbook for, let's say, if you had 400 properties or 400 units, you would have to do this for every single unit. You have to only give the information for the tenant that you're serving if we didn't come up with a way to have a unique identifier. So on our end, what we've done is when you submit your workbook to us for review, we're going to go in and make a unique identifier for each unit, a separate number from their unit number that's then sorted. You'll have all this information. This will be a relatively painless situation for you. We have then also created, when you give a proof of service to your tenant, a cover sheet that's a Word document, and we are going to do something called mail merge, which will pull the unique identifier for each unit and the contact information into this cover sheet. You're going to have that with your proof of service for every unit. We're going to take care of that on our end and then provide it to you so that you don't have to do this kind of technical stuff yourself. We're going to make sure that it works very well for you and is as easy and painless as possible. So you're going to get that from us once you're ready to serve, and then you're going to have to finish completing the proof of service form, which means that like on the back of all of these kind of cover sheets, you're going to have to say, like, on the 12th of December, I filed this, I served this on my tenants. I can go ahead and share that form with you today. It's almost ready for release. And you're going to serve it on the tenants, and then you're going to let us know that you served it, and you're going to provide us with the proof of service that's been signed for every unit. Okay, we just need to see that and make sure that you really have served this on your tenants. Then we are going to send out those notices of formal filing. Your tenants have 30 days to respond to the petition. They can also request documentation. In that case, we will redact the information that's necessary for it to be released so that you don't have to do that. And then finally, there's the whole review and final determination. You're going to receive a letter from us that has the adjustment amount as determined by this petition process. Your tenants will also receive that. And then upon that period, you as the landlord are going to have to send out the notice of adjustment. So we're going to provide that notice of adjustment form to you with your notice of formal filing from us, and help you if you need it over the course of those 30 days plus days that the tenant has to respond to the petition. And we have to figure out the final determination. You're going to fill out those forms and just be prepared and ready to go for when we send you the notice of final determination. I'm going to skip over this part since we already talked about it. And then again, as always, if you have questions or you need help, you can reach out to us. So we also have some great terms to know in this petition form itself and the instructions. And then here's the actual form. So the petition form is pretty simple. It has your landlord information, if you need interpretation and translation support, the representative authorization, the representative information. Remember, if you are a property manager filling this out on behalf of the owner, you need to complete that representative authorization form. Then you have property information that you'll put in. When is your petition submission due? And then we start talking about some of the meat of the workbook itself. So you're going to figure out, do I have these on my property? And you're going to click. If you do, you'll click which ones are applicable to you. It's going to help you fill out your workbook later. And then you're going to figure out your workbook. Oh, look, we already clicked in that in that page in our instructions. We figured out that we needed the standard workbook, so it's already actually populated here. And you're going to figure out what documentation you need based on your workbook. If you use the standard workbook or the all utilities workbook, you're going to make sure that you have all of these things for worksheets 2, 3, and 4. If you're using the condensed workbook, you're only going to need this stuff for worksheet 2. If you have any documentation that's missing, you're going to describe the documentation and then why it's not available. And then finally, any additions or explanations you want us to know. So is there something weird going on the property? Like you have half of a pool and you used to have a whole pool, or you're concerned about your landscaping. What does the definitions of landscaping mean? You're going to want to just look at those relevant terms because it's in there. Anything you want us to know, you're just going to describe stuff in here. You can put in as much information as you want. And then finally, once the petition is ready to be served, so on your tenants, so this is after I've done the notice of submission with you, all that kind of stuff, then you're going to go ahead and sign and date. And just know that this is under penalty of perjury and all of that kind of technical stuff. But like it says here, do not complete until we let you know that it's ready to be served. Okay, that's the form. Again, it's a pretty basic form. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And are there any questions about the petition form itself before I move on to the workbook? I'm still quiet out there today. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share the workbook. And this is what it looks like. So this is what the workbook looks like. We start out with instructions, and then the next worksheet is contact information. We then have unit information, which you can see here. And unit information is really where we start to get into the way that the workbook is functioning. So you are going to see in this workbook that there are gray cells, white cells, and green cells. Anything that's not blank or white is going to be auto-calculating. If it's white, you need to put information in it. So for instance, you're going to put in the unit ID number plus, and then add the number of bedrooms. So how many bedrooms does each unit have? For the sake here, we're going to say 1, and then it's going to auto-populate and tell us the number of rooms for the unit. So when we talk about the number of rooms that are being used for the calculation for the City of Mountain View's utility adjustment amount, it is not the number of bedrooms. It is the number of total rooms in the unit. And what does that mean? That is looking at the number of bedrooms plus if there's a living room and a kitchen. So if I pick studio, it's going to say that we have a kitchen and a living room, and it's looking at the studio as not a bedroom, right? So it's just adding kitchen and living room. And we're going to add in a couple other units here. I want you to see how the workbook works. And we have a 1 bedroom and we have a 5 bedroom. I mean, how many have, or 5, how many units have 5 bedrooms? We're going to pick 3. So you can see we've got 2, 3, and 4. That's the number of rooms. And then the next one is to figure out the Santa Clara County allowance. So in this petition process, we're looking at 2 different calculations. One is this Mountain View calculation based on the number of rooms, and one is the Santa Clara County utility allowance. Whichever ends up being the lesser amount for this adjustment process is the amount that will be yours to decide how much of it you want to charge to the tenant. So for the Santa Clara County calculation, it looks at the number of units in a building for a certain amount of and the rooms. So it's like this kind of complicated thing. You can see it here. It's doing all of this math for you. So if you have a building with 2 to 4 units, it then looks at the number of rooms and figures out what the allowance is for all of these different things. So like I said, it's based on the number of units in the building, not on the property. So in this, we're going to say that this building has 3 or 4 units. This one has 5 or more, and this one has 2 units. And then you're going to have to say whether or not it's occupied. So in this case, we're going to say this one's occupied, this one's vacant. I just want you to be able to see the different ways that this works. We're going to say that this one is occupied, but it's occupied after March 1st of 2024. This one is vacant, so we're going to leave it blank. And in this one, like in our example, they moved in a long time ago in August of 2015. The current rent for this unit is $2,000. This one's blank. And then the current rent for this is $2,450. The date of the last rent increase, we are going to leave this one blank because, we're going to actually enter the move-in date, which is 4/1/2024. Leave this one blank, and then this one, they received a rent increase in August of 2024. So they just received a rent increase. How is water charged for this unit? We're going to tell the spreadsheet that this one is included in rent because they moved in after the date, the March 1st date, and this one is paid through RUBS. So we're going to fill that out for all of these units. Okay, and then we're going to look at the next worksheet, which is for common areas. And the common areas, there's a common area standard deduction that assumes that the property has these categories on it. Again, if you're looking for what these definitions are, it is in that relevant terms to know in the petition form itself. So on this property, we're going to tell the worksheet that there is a pool, there is no landscaping, and there is a laundry facility. So it is taking away 5% of that common area deduction for a total common area deduction of 15%. And then we are looking at the water and trash bills. So we are going to fill this out. What we're looking for here is not the billing date of July 1st. We're looking at the service dates, okay? So keep that in mind. We want the service dates that are as close to and or after July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. So for instance, I have a property that just submitted their petition, and they submitted me bills that had the billing date as July 1st, but the service date was outside of the window. The service date was March 2023 through May of 2023. That is not what we're looking for. We're looking for the service date. So they just sent me new updated bills for that started July 18th of 2023 and run through July 17th of 2024. That is what we're looking for. We need the ones with service dates as close to this time frame as possible. So you're going to put in, July through September 2023 water bill, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to go ahead and put in, the type here. It tells us what it is when we click on it. And I'm just going to enter in all three of these so that you can see. You're going to put in the service period dates, and then I'm going to put in a, amount here. I'm actually going to make these a little separate so that you can see the differences. So it's going to add all of these things together. If I add another line item for water, it's going to keep doing that math. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You're not having to do any of the math or figure out anything here. It will take care of this for you. So I'm going to go ahead and allocate this to sewer and this one to trash. If you have a situation, we recently received a question where they said, I received 3 water bills per billing period because I have multiple buildings that get billed separately. What you're going to do is go over to the charge, and instead of just putting in that flat amount, because you have 3 bills, you can get the workbook to work for you. You put in equals, sum, and then you're going to put in whatever those monthly charges are. So 1,000 plus 1,000 plus 1,500. You're going to use this exact formula, and then it's going to do that math for you. You don't have to fill out an individual line for all 3 of those bills that were for July through September of 2023. You can put the formula in there, and then when we go to check your workbook, we'll have those bills and we can make sure that they were inputted correctly. So that is one way to deal with that issue. All right, now here's the great thing. We are pulling all of this information in from that worksheet. It is looking at those utilities that you inputted. It is looking at the common area deduction, the number of rooms on the property, and then it's looking at the utility charges per room. So we made a workbook that's doing this for you. You don't have to do this yourself. And it's figuring out the amount for the number of rooms on the property, which equals the monthly water charge per room. Okay? So it's doing all of that work for you. And why is that important? Because then you have your per unit calculation. And again, you don't have to do anything here. It is figuring this out on its own. So for this, we're looking at the number of rooms for the City of Mountain View calculation and the number of bedrooms and what type of building it is for the Santa Clara County allowance. And then it is figuring out how much the City of Mountain View allowance is, how much the Santa Clara is for each type of utility. And then it looks at what the total adjustment for the Mountain View utility is and what it is for the Santa Clara County utility adjustment. And then in worksheet 7, it figures out the per unit allowance. Okay, so what it's looking at here is that total utility adjustment that you just saw in worksheet 6 and the total utility adjustment for Santa Clara County that you just saw, and it's going to pick which one is lesser. That's in the regulations. So in this case, it's the Santa Clara County allowance plus 3.2%, which is the CPI for the period from the Consumer Price Index rate of inflation for the period of July through June, July 2023 through June 2024, the utility billing period that we're looking at. And it bumps up this amount, this final adjustment amount, to that. And then in worksheet 8, you're going to go ahead and tell the tenant and tell us what your proposed utility adjustment amount is. So you can see here, you have your maximum amount, and you can pick that full amount. So you could pick to 1035 or anything below. So let's say you don't want to bill the full amount, you just want to do, for whatever reason, $150. That's what you're going to tell us, okay? So that's the workbook in a nutshell. Most of it does what it needs to do on its own. So there's not a whole lot for you to have to fill out, which is nice. And you don't have to do any of the calculation. So just keep that in mind. And then before I go on to the next steps, are there any questions that I can answer about the way the workbook works? Again, just raise your hand. Oh, still silent out there. Really, no questions? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the things that you should be looking for from me when you submit your workbook for review. So the first thing that you're going to be seeing from me after you get your workbook in is the notice of submission review. It looks like this. And it looks like this. It's a blank form. And when you get it from me, it will tell you what to do. So if you give me your petition for submission, I'm going to go and I'm going to review it, and I'm going to tell you whether or not you're ready to serve on your tenants. So that would mean that you have this box marked here and this one here, that it's ready to serve, and you're going to follow these steps here. I might have some comments for you, but I probably won't. You're ready to go. If you have things that you need to correct, you're going to see this one, and it's going to be highlighted in red. It'll look like this when you get it from me. And it's going to tell you this is not ready to serve. You have work to do. And this box will be marked. And then it's going to tell you right in here what you need to fix. Okay, so it's going to say this petition form is missing information in section 1, and then I'm going to tell you you didn't put in the name of the owner. Or, you know, correct. This one has information missing in worksheet 8. Please fix it. And then I'll tell you exactly what you need to do to fix it. Now, it could be that you missed your submittal deadline. And if that happens, you're going to see this one. It's going to come to you like this. The whole thing is going to be red. And it's going to tell you that you missed your deadline and that your submission is denied. And you're going to see this box here marked, and that this is all highlighted in red. And it's going to go over everything that you have to do to be in compliance with the law. And you will need to notice your tenants. Your tenants will also be receiving notice from us that you did not meet the submission deadline, and that they can now file petitions against the property for receiving unlawful rent increases through RUBS. So just keep that in mind. So you'll get this back. If you have corrective action that you need to do, again, you'll have 15 business days from the date of the notice. Just gonna make this say business while I'm thinking about it. you have 15 business days to respond to this notice and fix what you have to fix. If you don't have it fixed in that time period, let's say we're working together to get it fixed, that's okay. We're still working together. You're not going to get dinged because you've already responded to me with what you're trying to work on it. So that's what that form looks like. Are there any questions? This is the first time a lot of you are seeing that form. Are there any questions about that? Really? Nothing in the Q&A? No questions? You can type your question in. You don't have to just raise your hand. I'm surprised, no questions. This is the first time I've had a quiet bunch about this petition process. Okay, well, the next form that you will give to your tenants after you receive this clear notice of submission, you're then going to give out a proof of service form. You're going to get this from us when your petition is approved and ready to be served. You're going to get this form from us. I'm going to turn these guidelines off. Easier to look at. Okay, you're going to get this from us. And this is what you're serving on your tenant. I know we're a little bit over, but I want to make sure that you have some more information than what we've shared in the past. So this is your next the next step that you'll have to do once you receive your notice of submission review back from us and we say, yay, go serve this on your tenants. You're going to get this form from us. So you will have a batch of these that we're going to provide to you. And like I said before, we're going to pull in information from your workbook that will have this all included: the address, the unit number, the unique identifier, and the tenant name. You're not going to have to put that in. We're going to pull it from the Excel workbook for you into this. And where you see here, mail merge unique ID, it will also be completed for you through our process. And then on the back, you have this proof of service. This will be, when you receive this, you will not be able to edit this document except for picking the type of service that you're going to do and then typing in the day, the month, and the year, the tenant name, the address, and the email. We might pull this from the workbook too. We're working on that to see if we can pull from multiple pages. If not, you're going to have to fill that out. But then you just fill out your name, your title, and the property owner address, and then day, month, and year. So again, we're trying to automate this as much as possible for everyone and make the process as easy as possible. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by having these unique identifiers so that you as the property owner don't have to go through and redact information from every single workbook. So you're going to have a workbook that is your copy that will have everything, all of the contact information, all of the unit information, every single piece. And then the one that you'll serve on your tenants will have a separate workbook that we've created for you where it gets rid of that contact sheet. So that doesn't go out to every tenant. And it has a unique identifier instead of a unit number, and the units are sorted differently. So, it's not a unique identifier where it's unit 1 now has a unique identifier of 123, and then it's still unit 1. No, it's going to be sorted for you. So just know that way you don't have to redact every single workbook for your tenants. We've kind of figured out that process for you. So that's what the proof of service to tenants looks like. And then once you let me know that you've done that proof of service, then I'll send out the notice of formal filing to you and your tenants. And I can share with you today the notice of formal filing, what that looks like for tenants. Here we go. So this is what it looks like for tenants. It tells them that it's not a rent increase, that this is a notice, and it includes a tenant response form, and they have 30 days to respond. notice of filing of the one-time utility adjustment petition. It tells the tenant about the process. You've already seen this in your workbook, in your petition form, it's the same exact information. And then it tells them the next steps in the process. So it tells them that they can respond to the petition and to look for additional communication from me, and then gives them those relevant terms to know, just like in the petition form itself. So they also have a little bit of that same information so that it's less confusing. So it looks like a long form, but it's not. It's mostly just supportive information. And then, so they're going to get that from us. And from us, they're going to get a response form. And I'm going to show you what that response form looks like. So you don't have to give this out. This is not something that you have to worry about. But this is what it looks like. So they're going to get this response form. It tells them, they just received this one-time utility adjustment petition, and that they should review the petition closely and make sure the information's right. And then they're going to say, that they dispute certain sections of the petition, if they dispute certain sections of the petition, and then they'll go on to provide additional information and explanations as they need to. So it's a pretty easy form to complete, and it's just a part of the response process. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell right now that I have to share with you. Are there any questions about these next steps while we're here today? You can go ahead and use the Q&A function or raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. Okay, it seems like we're kind of quiet again today. We're going to have another one of these workshops with in November. We just scheduled that date. I'll get it out to everyone so that you can join. It's going to go into a little bit more detail on what the notice of formal filing for landlords will look like, and that averaging form that I mentioned, where it shows what type of adjustment the tenant will be receiving that you as the landlord need to do while the tenant response period is going on. So you're going to have to pull the utility bills for each unit and put this into this form that then will compare that to the one-time utility adjustment and tell tenants what kind of adjustment they're receiving, if it's an upward adjustment or a downward adjustment. That affects when you need to notice for these adjustments. So it's really important. You can join me for that next month and we'll have that underway. And at any time, you can always reach out to me. And I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint again, because there's a couple things that I want to finish up with. Okay. So these are some of the details about determining everything. This will be in the PowerPoint that is shared online. To start preparing for the utility adjustment petition, you're going to collect this information here and this information here. And then you can start filling out your petition form and your workbook. And if at any time you have questions, you can come to our Housing Help Center. We're holding this every single Thursday now from 1 to 3 p.m. You can come into the office or you can join me virtually by going to mountainview.gov/housing help clinics. Again, this is every single Thursday from 1 to 3. And we also have office hours every Tuesday at 10, and that's mountainview.gov/RSP office hours. Those are virtual and you can join those. If those don't work for you, we may be able to find additional times to be able to assist. So you can always contact me by going to mvrent@mountainview.gov and emailing us there. And it looks like I have one question. Oh, someone's wondering the cost of getting a sub-meter. That is something you'd have to reach out to the utility provider and a general contractor for. I don't have that information. Are there any other questions today? All righty. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm really glad that you could that you could join, and that hopefully I helped you in answering some of your questions. And again, if you need any assistance, please reach out to us and make sure you're going to hit those submittal deadlines. And we'll be back next month. Thank you again. Have a good afternoon.